Welcome to Camp Conversations Parenting Edition. I'm your host, Dayna. I have a master's in counseling psychology, a background in clinical counseling, and teaching. This is a podcast chock full of resources for parents, grandparents, educators, social workers, anyone that works with children. So sit back, relax, and let's start today's conversation. Hi, welcome back, everyone. Today's podcast is around two questions that came up in our workshop last night with all the participants of our camp bundle package. So these two are our questions of the week, and I'm going to share with you some of the insights that our group had after last night's workshop. The first question was from a parent that said, they keep hearing this statement, your kids were fine until you came. And they have heard this from grandparents. They've heard this from caring teachers, daycare workers, that their kids' behavior is pretty smooth and regulated. And then when they come home or they come to pick them up, that there is an escalation to the behavior. And in our workshop, we go through the steps of camp. So first off, we focus on how does this impact you as the parent? And so if you have heard from the people looking after your kids that things are great until you walk in the door, how does that impact how you start walking in the door? And everyone in our workshop last night shared that it now causes them to walk in the door expecting that the behavior is going to be poor. So they walk in tense, they walk in worried, they walk in maybe with their shoulders elevated is what a lot of them said, some tension in their faces, and they speak a little bit differently. And so many of them said it becomes like a forced over the top bubbly welcome, like, hi buddy, how was your day? And they're trying to counteract what they expect to happen, which is the kids to act negatively. Then we ask them, okay, well, if we were to ask your kids, when you speak that way or when you move that way, do they start to cue in that something might be wrong? And so many of them say, especially with our older elementary cohort, that their kids are really quick to pick up on when their parents are tense. And so our step one, when we're looking at this from a camp perspective, if you can relate to these parents and you have found that you're expecting your children to misbehave when you get home because you hear that this happens so much, step one is about you. Step one is really making sure that that transition time between work and pickup or whatever you are doing when you are away from your children becomes a time where you practice some sort of regulation strategy. Maybe that's deep breathing, maybe that's rocking out in your car for a couple of minutes, calling a friend, but having that regulation strategy so you can do your best to show up every day as if it is a new day and leave behind this comparison to how your kids act with you versus how they act with other people. And two, what so many of our participants said last night was that they remind themselves that the reason our children are showing dysregulation around us is usually because they feel really safe with us. And so they say they have kind of a running mantra. I am safe, they feel safe. I am safe, they feel safe. Just to help themselves stay regulated. Okay, our next A. So A of camp is assessing the needs. And we do this by asking ourselves, why does their behavior make sense? And we've touched on this because they feel a little safer around you. And we can go back to that spillover cup analogy. Your kids, just like you, only have so much space for big emotion within their little bodies through the day. And so if they are holding it together when they are frustrated or overwhelmed or scared, then by the end of the day, they're usually near the brim of their cup. They are hitting that top of that big emotion cup. And so when they see you, it's almost like a pressure release valve. And that whole cup or that whole pumped up balloon hits that pressure release valve, and then it just releases everything that's in there. And that usually looks like a little bit of a meltdown or a tantrum or dysregulation. So why does their behavior make sense? Why do I keep saying that question? Because when this happens, I say that out loud. You know what? It makes sense. It makes sense that you are letting this all out. You've held it together all day. Ooh, it makes sense that it makes me a little tense because sometimes loud noises make my body tighten. Oh, it makes sense that you have a lot to release today. Today was a really big day and you had to move between a lot of different activities. We say out loud why it makes sense. Both of us are acting the way we act. This is also a script that you can give to either the grandparents, the daycare providers, the teachers working with your kids. Say out loud to my child why it makes sense that they're having a meltdown when I drop them off or pick them up, or that they might have a meltdown when I come. This isn't to give them permission to have a meltdown. It doesn't work that way. Just like everyone has already seen, when we tell our kids not to have a meltdown, it doesn't stop them from having a meltdown. When we tell them why it makes sense they're having a meltdown, it doesn't promote meltdowns. It takes the shame away from discussions on what we can do instead of having a tantrum around, rolling around on the ground or yelling. So we want to take that shame away. We say why the behavior makes sense out loud. If in the moment when you're picking your kid up, this escalates them more, it means they've completely flipped their lid and their logic brain is offline. So don't worry about saying this out loud. Focus back in on you. I'm safe, they're safe. I'm regulated to help their mirror neurons fire so they can be regulated. We stay calm together and we leave the space in however works for us that day. So some days that might be holding hands and walking out together. Some days, depending on the size of your child, that might be picking them up. Some days that might look a little bit more uncomfortable. This is our in the moment strategy. Just stay calm. Our real work is going to be in our P of camp. So C, focus on you, regulate yourself. A, say out loud why the behavior makes sense. M, what are their strengths and what are your family values? So when you feel like hesitant on whether, do I send them again tomorrow? Is this really okay? You stay strong in the decisions that you make around childcare based on your family values. Are there things that you have to do to meet your needs, which is why this childcare is happening? Stay strong on that. Does education and your kid attending school at the location that they're at meet your family values? Then yeah, stay strong on that decision. Use your values to guide your decision making when there are big behaviors that make you kind of weary as to whether or not to keep following this direction or not. The other half of M is what are your kiddos' strengths, and can we bring them into these moments of transitions? And so if I have a kiddo that their strength is athleticism, or their strength is reading, or their strength is riding a bike, can I bring any of those things for the meetup celebration time? I'm using the word strength, but I'm kind of wanting to use that hand in hand with passion. So is there something that my child has that's a strength or a passion that I can just start experimenting with having with me when it comes to that transition time or that handoff time? And this, again, for this parent was common between grandparents and back home. And so one of the strategies that they tried, because their kid was passionate about biking, they loved biking, it was a real strength for them that they started showing up with their bikes so that they could ride off together. It was a bit of a distraction tool. And finally, this is where the real work happens. Proposing interventions is our P of camp. In this place, we look at a collaborative discussion on how to meet both parties' needs. So that would be your needs as the parent and your child's needs. So we've already had this in the moment potential discussion of why the behavior makes sense. This is how we start our collaborative discussion again. So completely away from the transition time, we open the door with why the behavior makes sense. You know what? It really makes sense that you have a hard time leaving grandma's house because, and we talk about why it's hard. What was happening there that was fun? Talk about how the rules are different at the two different houses. Maybe at this in this particular person that shared this in our workshop last night, at the grandparents' house, kids have to sit down at the dinner table all together, and at home, kids are allowed to stand up and walk around the table or get up and down on their seat, have a couple bites and have a break. So there's a whole different system, and it takes a lot for their child to be able to sit through a whole meal at the grandparents', which is filling their little emotional cup. And so they brought this up. It makes sense that you need to let some of it out when you see me, because you've been holding it together around the dinner table all evening. And then the collaborative discussion becomes to how do we meet the need to let it out in a way that feels safe for all of us. And so your need as the parent, the need of this parent was to have feelings of safety, which were kind of around peace and connection with their child. And the child's need was some autonomy and letting off that steam that they had to keep in while they were at the grandparents' house. And so the parents said, one thing I was trying, that they're proposing for the intervention, is to bring your bike. I wonder if you have other ideas that we could let some steam out. And now this parent has been part of our camp approach for quite some time. And so their child has some practice with collaborative discussions, and the child proposed walking outside, grabbing their sweater or their backpack, putting it over their mouth, and setting a timer for 1 minute, and just getting to yell into the sweater or backpack for 1 minute and jump around, and that was all that they really wanted. And they put this in place just today, and I have a message from this parent that just today the meltdown didn't happen. And so this is going to be a collaborative discussion that keeps happening between the parent and child, and the child gets to see that they have some autonomy in deciding how to reduce this behavior, which empowers our children, helps them become critical thinkers, and helps them develop some problem-solving strategies that are useful for them for the rest of their lives, while also reducing the behavior that we're finding so challenging. So 1C, check in with yourself. A, talk about why the behavior makes sense. Share that with the provider, whether that is the daycare, whether that is the grandparents, whether whoever is looking after your child, share that that's the strategy that you use, why it makes sense. Reflect on some of your child's strengths and passions, and share them again with the other providers on how we could use some of those strengths and passions to help with that transition from them to you. Remind yourself of your family values, why you are doing this when it feels so difficult to stick to decisions that you see are dysregulating for your child. And P, keep having those collaborative discussions. What are ways that your child, now that we've talked about why the behavior makes sense, what are some outlets that they could have for that behavior that feels empowering to them? None of us love the feeling of having a tantrum that takes over our bodies. And when we can practice these collaborative problem-solving conversations, kids become quite quick at coming up with ideas where their body doesn't take over, and they kind of hold the power while releasing that need in a way that feels good to them. The question that came up around screens last night prompted another question, and the other question had to do with our M of camp. So, why are we using screens in our home, and does it align with our values, and does that impact how we're showing up when screens are being used? So, our C of camp is exploring ourself. Our A of camp is assessing the needs behind our child's behavior. Our M of camp is looking at their strengths, passions, and our family values. And our P is proposing interventions. I'm not going to go into full detail into each one this time because I feel like each of these screen conversations is so specific to the parent and the family. If you really would love to chat with me about the dynamic in your family, then I strongly suggest joining our bundle package where we get to have these live discussions together every week, because in our workshop last night, each family had a different reason why shutting the screens off was so difficult. One family was because they didn't actually value the use of screens in their home, and they were just using them as a regulating tool, and it was a slippery slope that they had gone down. One family found it so dysregulating because they really wanted screens to be a point of connection, like family movie nights, and yet one of their children really wanted to have all the autonomy when it came to screens on what the family watched. And they would have big behavior explosions when they didn't get to be the ones to make the choice. And then other families, the real frustration was having a balance between screen time and outdoor time, and just not wanting the tantrums to exist, wanting to be able to continue using screens within the day, but just not wanting the tantrums to be there. So for each of these parents, the C, why, what was going on for them, why they were feeling so dysregulated was different, and the value that they were working from was different. So as a group, we were able to kind of work through each family's value. I want to jump into the A, why the behavior makes sense. Camp is built off of intrinsic motivation because so many of the parenting tools we use rely on quick fixes, external motivators, rewards, and punishments. And what I was really seeing more in the mental health research was helping build intrinsic motivation, both for ourselves to remain calm and competent parents, and building intrinsic motivation within our children, so they are motivated to look after themselves and support a larger community, which I feel builds resilience and stamina across the lifespan. And so we talk about why the behavior makes sense in a regulated time with our child. It makes sense that turning off the screen, or it makes sense that not being the one that gets to pick the show, or it makes sense that having to sit through a movie with your whole family, whatever it is that is causing the tantrum, why it makes sense. Well, it makes sense. It aligns with intrinsic motivation research. We're designed to be hooked on screens because they meet all of our needs. Connection, we are guaranteed connection when we turn the screen on. Autonomy, we have a lot of autonomy over what we get to watch and for how long we get to watch it, or what game we get to play and how we go about playing it and completing the levels. Purpose, there is always purpose when it comes to a screen. Either there's going to be a wrap up when it comes to what we're watching. There is purpose in what we have picked because it aligns with things that we're interested in or things that we want to learn. And then mastery, we also, if we're engaging with something, usually get to master a skill in a game that we're playing, learn a new level. If it's a show on a topic that we're interested in, we start feeling some sense of mastery on the topic. I don't know if any of you are like me, but sometimes I watch like doctor shows like House or Grey's Anatomy, and I'm like, yeah, I understand. Oh, I've seen an issue like this before. I could diagnose that. Really, I could not, but I'm gaining some feeling, some sense of mastery just by engaging with that screen. And so it makes sense that we all have trouble controlling our amount of time with them. how do we talk about this with kids? We share it from usually one of the most effective strategies is sharing why you find it difficult, right? So our goal is to take away the shame and show them, I don't see you as the problem. I see the problem that this is a tool. Screens are a tool, an object, whatever we want to call them, that are really hard to control our time on. So that's the problem. And I'm on your team figuring out a strategy that feels good for all of us on how to best allocate our time with them or how to manage our time with them. And then we move to that proposing interventions, which is that collaborative discussion with our child. So it makes sense that it is so difficult to do this. And now I'm going to share with you a little anecdote of how I find it so difficult to control my time with screens so that you feel less alone with it. And maybe if you're an older child, and I'm talking to my adolescent, I'm going to share with them maybe even a stat that I read or a news article that I came across about how difficult it is to manage our time on screens. And then we're going to look at, for your age, I'm going to remove the problem from you. I see that a healthy amount is X. So we can propose like, hey, separate from you. It's not me trying to control your screen time. Separate from you, it says 7-year-olds should have a maximum of, and I don't actually know this number off the top of my head, but let's just say a maximum of 2 hours a day on screens. So let's talk about together, because my need as your parent is to provide a healthy and safe environment. So some of that sometimes means that I have to put rules or limits in place around things like screen time. And so let's talk about, when I put this limit in place on 2 hours, what you could be doing with those 2 hours and when you could be using them. So what are some of your favorite things to engage with? What would be some of the best ways to let you know when the 2 hours is up? And then also reducing some of the shame around the reactions that are going to happen. Because when you first start being clear on these boundaries because they align with your needs and your values, your kids are going to push back, and that's okay. That's the sign of a healthy kid, and we want them to do that because we are helping them build resilience. We're showing them that your emotions aren't going to completely control you, and then we're going to show them that we can still give you some autonomy to meet that need for autonomy, connection, and that sense of purpose within that time. And so let's talk about what are your favorite things to engage with. Let's talk about what that would look like in practical terms. So if your favorite thing to engage with is a movie, then that's probably going to take up your whole 2-hour window. So it won't leave time for games. And really building in this collaborative piece. And if you're open to it with your family values, being flexible around what this could look like. So if it is 2 hours a day for a 7-year-old, does that mean it has to be a 2-hour chunk? What if your child says, can I watch 20 minutes spread throughout the day? Are you okay with that? So if we're expecting them to be flexible and accepting of meeting our need, which is providing a healthy, safe environment, for example, then could we be flexible in meeting their need, which is maybe having some more autonomy around when that screen time happens, what it is that they're engaging with. This is a very, very brief summary of these 2 pretty difficult questions. Again, if you would love to chat about the specifics of your family, come check out our bundle package. There isn't a wait list. It is a very small group. You get to come weekly, talk to me directly, and we can put interventions and collaborative discussions and strategies in place specifically for your family. I can't wait to meet you there.